Maya Carter was not just a name, it was a force. She had risen through the ranks of the feminist movement to become its most respected, and at times, most controversial figure. As the leader of Empower Now, one of the largest and most influential feminist organizations in the world, Maya wielded power with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Her organization, with its global reach, was known for shaping policy, leading protests, and transforming how society viewed women's rights. But as much as she was revered by some, there were those who felt uneasy about the sharp edges of her ideology. Maya had spent years carving out a space in the feminist movement where she could challenge every social norm that kept women shackled, whether in the workplace, the home, or within the limits of societal expectations. She had advocated for women's independence, for breaking free from the patriarchal structures that dictated how women should look, speak, and behave. Her message was one of liberation, and she had transformed the lives of countless women by encouraging them to rise above traditional gender roles. However, Maya was also a believer in boundaries, ones that, for her, were essential for maintaining the integrity of her mission. To her, feminism was about empowerment, but it was also about a shared vision of equality that didn't entertain distractions. For all her advocacy for freedom and independence, Maya had no patience for views that she deemed counterproductive or divisive. She believed that there was only one way to approach the movement, her way. The idea of a fragmented feminist ideology, where differing opinions could weaken the core message, was something Maya couldn't abide by. Her views on feminism were clear: it was a movement that demanded solidarity among women, but only for those who adhered to a specific set of principles. Gender roles needed to be destroyed, but they should be replaced with a new order, one where women were in control, not just of their own lives but of the direction of society as a whole. This meant challenging everything from the corporate structure to family dynamics to the way women were represented in the media. It was no longer just about getting women into the boardroom, it was about redefining what it meant to be a woman in the 21st century. Yet Maya was deeply suspicious of any views that threatened the unity of this vision. She saw factions within the feminist movement, those who embraced different kinds of empowerment, who questioned her approach, and she dismissed them as distractions. To her, these women were either too naive or too misguided. They were not seeing the bigger picture, and they threatened to derail the progress that had been made. Maya's mission was not to merely promote women's rights, it was to reshape society. To do so, however, she knew that she would have to fight for her vision of empowerment at any cost, even if it meant shutting down voices that didn't fall in line. She was not just an advocate for women, she was a guardian of what she believed was the only true path to liberation. For Maya Carter, feminism was a war, and in war, there could be no room for dissension. Sophia Torres was the face of the new generation of feminists, a fresh voice in a movement that was beginning to feel the weight of its own successes. At only 26, she had already become an influential figure among young activists, drawing attention with her inclusive approach to feminism. While Maya Carter's name had become synonymous with strong, unyielding empowerment, Sophia had a different vision. She believed feminism was a multifaceted movement, one that could not afford to exclude voices simply because they didn't adhere to one set of beliefs. Sophia's brand of feminism was inclusive in every sense of the word. She welcomed debates, discussions, and even disagreements, believing that progress came from acknowledging the complexity of individual experiences. She championed a feminism that embraced diversity, not just of race and class, but also of thought. To her, true empowerment meant creating space for everyone, especially women whose views might challenge the mainstream. Sophia wasn't afraid to confront the uncomfortable truths about the movement itself, questioning its mainstream narrative and calling out those who, in her view, silenced dissent. Her rise was swift. Sophia's social media presence exploded, her words resonating with young women from all corners of the globe. She spoke at conferences, penned viral essays, and led grassroots campaigns, always pushing for a feminism that acknowledged the intersections of identity, race, sexuality, class, and even ideological differences. She argued that feminist unity didn't mean uniformity, and that the movement should welcome its internal contradictions, rather than shying away from them. Sophia's influence didn't go unnoticed by Maya. For years, Maya had been the undisputed voice in feminist circles, a leader who spoke for the movement with a clarity and decisiveness that brooked no opposition. But now, here was this young woman, Sophia, whose very presence threatened the foundation of Maya's carefully constructed narrative. Sophia wasn't just a new voice, she was a challenge to the established order. At first, Maya dismissed Sophia as a passing trend. She saw her as an idealistic youth, someone who didn't yet understand the complexities of leadership in a global movement. But as Sophia's following grew, so did the tension between their ideologies. What Maya saw as an ideological threat, Sophia viewed as an opportunity for growth. Where Maya wanted a unified, singular vision of feminism, Sophia argued for a feminism that embraced its contradictions and differences. The divide between the two deepened when they were invited to speak at the same conference. Maya's speech, as usual, was powerful, focused on strength, independence, and solidarity for women who were ready to toe the line. Sophia's speech, however, was different. She openly challenged the very idea of a monolithic feminism, advocating for a more flexible, pluralistic approach. She called for a space where all women could speak freely, whether they embraced mainstream feminism or questioned its very foundations. Maya's discomfort with Sophia's approach was palpable. She watched from the side as the younger generation cheered Sophia's every word. For the first time in years, Maya questioned her own beliefs. Could the feminist movement really afford to be as inclusive as Sophia suggested? Or was this a dangerous dilution of everything she had fought for? The seeds of conflict had been sown, and as Sophia's influence continued to grow, Maya began to feel the ground beneath her leadership shift. The debate between Maya Carter and Sophia Torres was the talk of the feminist world. Billed as a showdown between two generations of women's rights leaders, the event drew thousands to the auditorium, with millions more watching online. It was supposed to be a conversation about the future of feminism, with both women sharing their views on women's empowerment. Maya took the stage first, her presence commanding the room. The audience greeted her with loud applause as she stepped up, her suit sharp and her tone assertive. She spoke of women's strength, independence, and the need for solidarity to dismantle patriarchal structures. The fight for equality is far from over, she declared, but we must unite, or risk losing everything we've fought for. Maya's voice was confident and resolute, as she emphasized the importance of a collective, unified movement to overcome societal obstacles. The audience responded with applause, hanging on her every word. She was the embodiment of unwavering power, clear, concise, and authoritative. Maya knew how to speak to a crowd, and tonight, it was no different. Her vision of feminism, strong, singular, and unwavering, was embraced by those in the room who saw her as the unquestioned leader of the movement. Then, it was Sophia's turn. She approached the microphone, calm and poised, her approach starkly different from Maya's. The audience listened intently as Sophia spoke about the need for an inclusive feminism, one that welcomed diverse voices and perspectives, even those that didn't always align with the mainstream narrative. Feminism isn't one size fits all, she said. It's a spectrum, not a monolith. Sophia's words were measured, but powerful. She argued for intersectionality, the need to consider race, class, sexuality, and other factors when discussing women's empowerment. A movement that shuts down dissent, she continued, isn't empowering, it's silencing. As Sophia spoke, the atmosphere shifted. Some in the audience nodded in agreement, while others cast wary glances toward Maya. It was clear that Sophia's perspective resonated with many younger feminists who saw her as a breath of fresh air, someone who embraced complexity rather than oversimplification. Maya, however, was not impressed. She listened with growing irritation. When it was her turn to respond, she wasted no time. Sophia, Maya said sharply, what you're proposing is naive. A divided movement is a weak movement. We don't have time for endless debates. The world needs action, not disunity. Her tone grew more pointed. We need strength. We need unity. Your approach only breeds confusion and fractures the cause. Sophia remained calm. Strength comes from inclusivity, not exclusivity. We cannot silence women simply because they don't agree with one version of feminism. The tension in the room was palpable. Maya's words were biting, dismissing Sophia's ideas as impractical and dangerous to the movement's progress. The ideological divide between the two had become impossible to ignore. Maya's tactic of shutting down dissent was now on full display, and the audience was beginning to see the cracks in her leadership. Sophia's inclusive message, though less forceful, had found its mark. The debate ended in a charged silence. While Maya had won the approval of many in the audience with her commanding presence, it was clear that Sophia's ideas had sparked a deeper, more meaningful conversation, one that Maya had tried to shut down. The rift between the two women had widened, and the future of feminism was now in question. While the public debate between Maya Carter and Sophia Torres had left the feminist world buzzing, behind the scenes, a much darker and more calculated battle was brewing. Maya, though a staunch advocate for women's empowerment, now found herself working overtime to protect her position. The rapid rise of Sophia's influence had begun to chip away at Maya's authority, and the fear of losing control gnawed at her. The very movement she had worked so hard to build was beginning to feel like it was slipping through her fingers. Maya's strategy was clear: she would use the full force of her power within Empower Now to silence those who supported Sophia. With an iron grip on the organization, she began subtly but effectively marginalizing anyone who spoke out in favor of Sophia's more inclusive approach. Meetings were manipulated, discussions steered away from Sophia's perspective, and those who publicly aligned themselves with the younger feminist found their voices stifled. Maya painted Sophia as an outsider, someone who threatened the integrity of the movement with her radical ideas. In internal memos and private conversations, Maya made it clear that the future of Empower Now depended on staying true to the vision she had built over the years. "Division is our greatest enemy," she would say, trying to rally her supporters by framing the situation as a battle for the soul of the movement. The message was simple: those who sided with Sophia were not just wrong, they were dangerous. Despite her outward confidence, Maya's actions betrayed a growing sense of insecurity. Every decision she made seemed to reflect a fear that her long-held position was in jeopardy. Her carefully crafted narrative of feminism, one that demanded unity at all costs, was now being questioned, and it unsettled her more than she was willing to admit. The internal conflict was suffocating. She told herself that she was protecting the movement, but deep down, she wondered if she was merely fighting to keep her grip on power. Maya had always believed that strong leadership meant making tough decisions. But now, the lines between doing what was best for the movement and doing what was best for herself were increasingly blurred. She questioned her own motives. Was she really trying to protect feminism, or was she simply afraid of being dethroned? In quiet moments, when the world was not watching, Maya allowed herself to reflect. Was her uncompromising stance truly empowering women, or was she stifling the voices of those who dared to disagree? Was unity worth the cost of silencing dissent, or was it the diversity of thought that truly pushed the movement forward? These questions lingered in her mind, but she quickly pushed them aside, focusing instead on maintaining her position at the helm of Empower Now. She convinced herself that her approach was the right one, that she was merely defending the integrity of a cause that was too important to be fractured. But deep down, the fear remained. The fear that Sophia, with her inclusive and flexible feminism, might just be the one to change everything. And as Maya manipulated the organization's internal politics to keep that from happening, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing more than she was protecting. The day of the national rally arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. Feminists from across the country had gathered for what was promised to be an unforgettable event, the highlight being a panel discussion featuring Maya Carter and Sophia Torres. Both women had risen to prominence in the feminist movement, but their ideologies couldn't have been more different. Now, the world would witness their clash in real time. Maya took the stage first, as expected. Her commanding presence and well-rehearsed rhetoric immediately captured the audience's attention. She spoke about strength, resilience, and the importance of standing united. "Feminism has come too far to entertain division," she declared, her voice booming through the microphone. "We must stand together to overcome the forces that seek to hold us back." Her message was clear and powerful, reaffirming her vision of feminism as a unified front, one that did not leave room for disagreement or dissent. The crowd responded with applause, the supporters of Maya cheering loudly. But when Sophia took the stage, the dynamic shifted. Sophia was calm, composed, but her words carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. "Feminism is not about a single voice, or a single ideology," Sophia said, looking directly at Maya. It's about the freedom to express different truths, even if they challenge the mainstream. She spoke of inclusivity, of creating a space where all women, regardless of their differences, could feel empowered to contribute to the movement. Sophia's approach contrasted sharply with Maya's. Her emphasis on diversity of thought, her call for a more flexible and inclusive feminism, resonated with many in the crowd. But not everyone agreed. The tension between the two women was obvious, and the audience was divided. Some cheered for Sophia's message of open-mindedness and intersectionality, while others clung to Maya's vision of a unified and uncompromising feminism. As the debate continued, the conversation became more heated. Maya's voice grew sharper, her tone more aggressive. "You're splitting the movement, Sophia. You're allowing personal differences to fracture what we've worked so hard to build. Your version of feminism weakens us all." Maya's attack was direct, and her words struck like a blow. She wasn't just criticizing Sophia's views, she was accusing her of undermining the very foundation of the feminist cause. Sophia, unfazed, responded with grace and conviction. "Unity does not mean uniformity, Maya. True strength comes from our differences. We cannot expect to move forward by silencing voices that don't align with a single ideology." She paused, her gaze steady. Feminism isn't about agreeing on everything, it's about fighting for the right to exist, to speak, to be heard, regardless of our differences. The audience was in an uproar, some shouting in agreement, others in protest. The divide between Maya and Sophia had never been clearer, and the ideological chasm between them seemed insurmountable. As the crowd erupted into applause or boos, Maya stood still, her face tense. She had always believed that her approach was the only way to empower women. Now, she was confronted with the uncomfortable truth that her vision might not be as universally accepted as she once thought. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Was she truly empowering women, or was she simply protecting her own power? Was unity worth the cost of silencing diverse voices, or was it inclusivity that would propel the movement forward? As Sophia's words echoed in her mind, Maya realized that the true meaning of empowerment was far more complex than she had ever imagined. The battle between them wasn't just ideological, it was personal, and it was changing everything. The aftermath of the rally was nothing short of a reckoning for Maya Carter. The fiery confrontation with Sophia had left more than just an ideological divide, it had fractured the very foundation of the organization she had spent years building. Empower Now, once a united force for women's rights, was now in turmoil. Maya's supporters, who had once followed her every word, were now questioning her leadership. Some had sided with Sophia, seeing her message of inclusivity as the future of feminism, while others were disillusioned by Maya's aggressive tactics and unwillingness to embrace diverse voices. In the days following the rally, Maya sat in her office, reviewing the emails and messages flooding her inbox. There were no longer the heartfelt thank you notes from supporters or the messages of solidarity. Instead, there were murmurs of discontent, members resigning, and former allies voicing their concerns. Her once solid grip on the movement had loosened. Empower Now was no longer the monolithic entity it had been, and Maya could no longer ignore the consequences of her actions. The internal conflict that had once been a quiet whisper now roared in her mind. Maya had spent years preaching unity at all costs, silencing those who didn't conform to her vision. But in doing so, she had forgotten the most fundamental truth of feminism: it was never about a single voice or a single viewpoint. It was about creating space for all women, including those whose perspectives didn't fit neatly into her rigid framework. As Maya reflected on the damage she had caused, a deep realization began to form. She had built her power by positioning herself as the leader of the feminist movement, and in doing so, she had suppressed dissenting voices, labeling them as a threat to the cause. In trying to protect the movement from fragmentation, she had become the one who was dividing it. Her uncompromising stance on unity had ultimately undermined the very principles of empowerment she had once championed. Maya realized that true empowerment didn't come from silencing those who disagreed with her. It came from lifting up all women, whether they shared her views or not. She had to accept that the movement was bigger than her, bigger than any one leader. And that meant creating space for new voices, new ideas, and new approaches. Sophia, with her inclusive feminism, had shown her that there was more than one path to progress. After days of reflection, Maya made the difficult decision to step down from her leadership role. She announced her departure in a heartfelt statement, acknowledging the importance of embracing diversity within the movement. "Feminism is about empowerment," she wrote. "But empowerment means listening to all voices, even those that challenge our own." The organization was left in the hands of others, leaders like Sophia, who represented the new generation of feminists, ready to build a more inclusive and flexible movement. As Maya stepped back, she found peace in the knowledge that the cause would continue to grow, evolving with the voices of those who had been previously silenced. In the end, the feminist movement moved forward, but it was no longer defined by one person's vision. It was a collective effort, one that embraced its contradictions, welcomed new ideas, and, most importantly, allowed every woman to be heard. Maya had learned the hard way that empowerment wasn't about control, it was about freedom. And sometimes, letting go was the most empowering act of all.